Okay, hey everybody, it's been a while. So there's kind of a lot of new content coming, and I never really ever did go back and talk about exactly how to use this tutorial series or how I think you should be using any tutorial series to have things work the best. So I thought it'd be a good idea to take a moment and discuss how I feel like you should be using my tutorials and some good ideas I think for using tutorials in general. So this is going to be a 6-part list, and we're just going to go through it off the top of my head. I have notes, but no script, so bear with me here. All right, so the number one, the very first thing that I think you should do when you're making a tutorial or following a tutorial series to make a project is keep them separated. You should have your own project. So let's say you want to make something similar to the Zelda series. So you should have your own project kind of over here on its own, and this shouldn't be what you're using to follow the tutorial, and you should have your tutorial project separate from that. And the reason that I think you should do that is following the tutorial series is a lot of learning how to do stuff, and what gets covered in the tutorial might not be exactly how you want things to be in your own. This way, when you're following the tutorial, you can go through and figure out how to do something. So let's say you figured out how to make your character move in 4 directions. Now, once you've done that in the tutorial series, a lot of times students will have a tendency to think, well, I've done that, I don't need to ever do it again. I did it once, I don't need to try to remember the concepts behind it, but that's very wrong. You need to understand not only that it worked, but why it worked and what you did to make it work. So when you go over something in the tutorial series, you can then try to replicate that in your own project. And when you're replicating that, that repetition of doing something is going to make it more likely for you to remember how to do it in the future. Likewise, if I cover something in the tutorial series that you don't want to have in your own series, you can keep it kind of over here. So let's say I cover, I don't know, a specific kind of attack or something like that that you don't want in your personal series. You can just keep it in the tutorial. That way you're kind of maximizing not just your opportunities to reproduce things, but also kind of honing it down to be your own project. All right, next up here, the tutorial is your notes, and this kind of is an extension of that first one. When you're going through the tutorial series, I want you to think of it as if it's you taking notes in a classroom, because this is actually how I have my students take notes. So it might be, I don't know, like part 1, I'm going to use walking as an example again. And then you take notes on how to make your character walk. The main idea behind it, rigid bodies, adding force to those rigid bodies. And then when you apply that to your own project, so this is going to be your own project, and I'm going to call that your homework. You can use your notes to help you do something on your homework, and that can make things kind of really sit better inside your head. All right, number 3 here. You want to think of ways that you can change it and try to implement those changes as you go. So again, let's say we've got our tutorial series here, and let's use something different now. Let's use NPCs. The NPCs work in a very specific way in the Zelda tutorial series, but let's say you want them to work differently. Currently I have them kind of just wandering around a little box, but maybe you want them to be able to follow things, or maybe you want them to have a routine, something more than that. You can think of ways that you can extend this. So let's say that you want them to have a daily routine. And when you're thinking of a change, you really have to break it down into individual pieces in order to try to figure out how to solve that problem. So you want to have a routine. So that means that you want to have a place where they begin, a place where they go to, and this go to could be just like a list. So go to A, B, C, as many as you want. And that means that you're going to have something keeping track of time, maybe. So like a time manager in your game. So as you're going through this, you can kind of decide how to fix things. So I could have a time manager. That time manager could let entities know what time it is, and then based on the time, we could then have the entities go from here to here to here to here. that's kind of a really simple way to do it, but this is kind of the mindset that you have to have as you're going through. The tutorial, and any tutorial series really, is only going to go over the bare basics. And you want to be thinking, how can I take these basics and extend them so they're more like what I want them to be? And so doing that means that you need to have your idea and then break your idea down into individual steps. And let's say that you're at the time manager here, right? And you don't know how to implement a time manager. If you were to go on Stack Overflow or the Unity forums and ask, how can I implement a time manager, you're going to get a lot of really good responses. Whereas if you go into the Unity forums or Stack Overflow and say, how can I give my NPCs a routine, you're going to get a lot of sarcastic responses. So if you take the time and think about how you can extend the project and then break that extension into pieces, you're going to have a better time overall, not just in your work environment, but also in the community. All right, so number 4, this one is something that I definitely haven't talked about before, but I definitely need to, and that's version control. Now, version control is kind of this wide-ranging topic as far as programming goes. When I'm talking about version control here, what I'm talking about is making sure that if you're going to try to make a big change to your project, so if you've got a working version of your project right here and you're going to make a big change to it, you don't want to make a big change on your only copy of that. You want to kind of branch off. This is actually what it's called in GitHub, is making a branch. You want to branch off and test something. So we'll call this experiment 1. Or actually, we'll call it experiment 626 for all the Stitch fans out there. And you want experiment 626 to be separate from your project so that if you do something here and you end up breaking things that were working before, you can always revert yourself back to this original project. So don't feel like you want to have just one folder, just one running version of your project. Every time you try something new, you want to extend that into a branch, and then you can bring that branch stuff over to your main project if you feel like you've got it working. So version control is really important. All right, so next, use a rubber ducky. And it doesn't have to actually be a rubber ducky. For me, at home, I'm not at home right now, I'm in my classroom, I have a little 3.5 inch, I think, figure of Rocket Raccoon. And what you want to use this for is if you try something new and it doesn't work, what you want to do is explain to this rubber ducky, here's what I want it to do, and here's what it is doing. And try to break both the problem and the way it's working down into as fine a grain as possible. And by just vocalizing what's going on and what you're having trouble with, you'll find that you have a much more open frame of mind for figuring out what went wrong and how to fix it. And that's kind of what rubber ducky debugging is called. In fact, if you Google search rubber ducky debugging, I'm even going to try and draw a little rubber ducky here. We're going to do little eye, little tail, little wing. If you Google rubber ducky debugging, you'll see a lot of people talking about stuff like this. So you want to be able to explain what you want to happen, be able to explain what is happening, and then maybe through that explanation, as fine as you possibly can, you can find out what the difference between those two things are and how to get it more towards where you want it to be. All right, the next one here is components. So whenever you're adding a new feature, the tendency, and this is, you'll hear a lot of people who make tutorials say, this is the wrong way to do it, but I'm going to do it this way just to show you how it works, is if you have a player character, the tendency is to have one giant script for everything that player does. So inside here you could have movement. And I'm guilty of this. I have done this in my tutorials. You can have health. You can have, I don't know, enemy checking. You can have input checking. And the tendency is, since you already have this script, if you're adding new functionality, why not add it all to this one script that you already have? It'll be faster that way, but it really isn't. What it does is it ends up making this incredibly brittle system that, let's say you want to add something else to your player. You want to add like a flash effect. if you add that in here, there's a chance that your flash effect could end up breaking or interfering with any of these other systems. And so it takes a long time to add this extra feature. The first few features you add get added super, super fast. So these are good. The next few features take a little bit longer. So I'm going to draw like a mirror. And they're kind of okay to enter, but they would have been faster if you had kept everything as its individual components. And then you get to a point where adding new things is a pain because you've created such a brittle architecture. Rather than doing that, you want to try to keep everything in its own component. So like your player health should be its own thing. Your player movement should be its own thing. And by doing this, you can not only make your structure much more flexible, because now if you add a flash script to this, it shouldn't mess with anything else that's already there. So it'll make everything more flexible and easier to add new components later on, but it'll also allow you to take advantage of inheritance, one of the most important parts of object-oriented programming. Okay, so more videos are coming this week, like a lot of videos are coming this week. I don't have them all edited yet. This is going to be the first one that I put out that's edited, but here's what's coming. We're going to do a new page here. So coming this week is Godot Match 3. And I'm going to break this down into bits and pieces. So Godot Match 3 is going to have a portion where we talk about adding ads into just the general structure of any kind of Godot app. That's going to be the very first one, and that's coming this week. We're going to talk about a better way to structure the Match 3 mechanics. And then we're also going to talk about adding software tools to make creating levels and requirements much better. And then we're also going to be talking about a better way to save data that allows you to see exactly what your saved data is in the screen. So this ads part, this is going to start coming out this week. I'm also going to start revisiting my Zelda tutorial. Now for the Zelda tutorial, I'm going to start with movement, but it's going to be broken up into categories as well. And I'm actually working with a community member, Dan T, about how to best set up these. So it's going to be, rather than one great big 85-part tutorial series, it's going to be several, as many as 10-part tutorial series. So there'll be something about setting up your player and movement. There'll be something about setting up enemies. And I'm going to try to make them so that they're modular, so that you could apply this to a lot of different structures of games. Now, coming this week, we're going to have, like I said, the ads part of Godot Match 3. And also, as far as Godot Match 3, we're going to have a playable demo. So you can see exactly what's there, and you guys can act kind of as my bug fixers and tell me what needs to be fixed or what might be wrong. That's going to be on itch.io later this week. Now for Zelda, there's also going to be a playable demo that's going to be up on itch.io late this week, early next week. And then I'm going to have videos up, probably 2 a week, maybe more, maybe less. Now those videos are going to premiere first on my Patreon, and then after a short exclusivity period, they're going to go to the wider public. If you want to contribute to me on Patreon, feel free. You are not by any way obligated to, especially with the world in the state that it is right now. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can. If you want to like this video, you can. If you want to subscribe, hit the bell button. If you're going to dislike the video, you should hit the dislike button twice to really show me you dislike it. Anyway, I hope everybody out there is doing well. Things are kind of better for me now. I was pretty darn sick for about 2 weeks, but I'm good now. So I hope everybody's doing well, and I will see you soon.